your 10-minute warning. Big Ten TED Live starts in 10 minutes. Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Ten Ted Live. It's night number 2, the second consecutive night of Big Ten Ted Live. So thanks for tuning in. We've got plenty to talk about here on the program tonight. We're going to recap. We've been beating it to death in the last few days, but big topics with the Wisconsin and Nebraska head coach. Both Luke Fickell in Madison and then Matt Rhule in Lincoln have their introductory press conferences today. So I'm just going to wrap up what I saw at those press conferences, who won it, who lost it. Can you lose a press conference, or is it just a wash? Man, I don't know what you got to do to lose a press conference. But so I'm just going to recap those. Sense of optimism after the press conference, that kind of thing, with Fickell and Rhule. So I'll talk about that. Former Michigan quarterback, former Big Ten champion quarterback, Cade McNamara, is entering the transfer portal. There are some Big Ten teams that should get on the telephone, text, I don't care, get a hold of Cade McNamara and try to get him in to be your quarterback. There's some programs out there that could benefit from Cade. Look, Cade's not a great quarterback, but Cade will do what Cade will do. So that's kind of what I want to see. So we're going to talk about that as well. At the end of the show tonight, we're going to be talking some basketball. North Carolina and Indiana. This game probably had a little bit more oomph before North Carolina lost back-to-back games to Iowa State and Alabama, but this is still a good game. Number 10 Indiana and number 18 North Carolina, so we'll talk about that preview of that game at the end of the show tonight. We've already got comments coming in regarding Nebraska and Wisconsin situation, specifically the Nebraska situation. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with my recap. Press conferences today, Matt Rhule at Nebraska, and of course you had Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. I'm going to start with Madison. In Madison, I'm going to start with Luke Fickell. Okay, kind of a weird setup, because you got this thing, this 4 p.m. thing where it looked like, okay, you do the normal thing where Chris McIntosh comes up, he introduces Luke Fickell, he makes a statement, and then they got this weird thing between Matt LePay, the voice of the Badgers, one of the very best play-by-play guys in the biz. You got this little round table type of thing with Fickell, and then the show ended, and then there was a press conference later in the day with the media. But whether it was the early event or whether it was the later media questions event, the Luke Fickell was a guy that portrayed a business-like approach. This is not a guy that was going to come in there and say a bunch of things and win the press conference. Like, that's not the kind of guy Luke Fickell is. He's a business-first type of guy, and, I don't think he's really looking to do much in terms of convincing people what he's going to do, how he's going to play. I think he lets his body of work kind of speak for that. There was a lot of talk about Jim Leonhard. Of course, that's kind of the focus. That's been the focus with Wisconsin ever since Luke Fickell was hired as the head coach of the Wisconsin Badgers. So that's been a pretty big deal. Like, we still don't know who's going to coach the bowl game. Is Barry Alvarez going to coach another bowl game? Wouldn't that be funny? But, we don't know what's exactly going to happen, whether it's at Wisconsin or Nebraska. We're going to find out a lot about what's to come for both of these teams and both of these staffs, because you look at Jim Leonhard at Wisconsin. Is he going to get retained? Mickey Joseph on that other side for Nebraska. I definitely think Mickey's got a better chance to be retained than Jim Leonhard does at Wisconsin. I think a lot of people were looking at Jim Leonhard to be the head coach at Wisconsin. So that's kind of what I got from Luke Fickell. And of course, he formed a relationship with Chris McIntosh in the past. Nothing really jumped out at me watching this press conference today from Luke Fickell. Look, I already know he's a good head coach, and I think he referenced this multiple times. I guess if there is one takeaway, it's this. He referenced and kind of glanced at the player in the earlier event where there were a lot of players in the building. He glanced at those players and he mentioned a lot of players. I got to talk to these guys. I got to get them to buy in, that kind of thing. Okay, because that's what Luke Fickell, that's going to be his hardest job, is keeping these guys in Madison because they love Jim Leonhard. Obviously, they committed to Paul Chryst, and obviously Jim Leonhard was on that staff. And when Jim Leonhard was the interim head coach, they really loved Jimmy Leonhard. And now with a new guy coming in, with Luke Fickell coming in, there's been a lot of feedback, not a lot of it positive. And I don't think it's a detriment. I don't think it's against Luke Fickell. It's just they really like Jim Leonhard and what he brought to the table. But going outside the box, I think, was a good thing that Chris McIntosh did, getting Luke Fickell. So that's kind of what I take away from the Luke Fickell side of things. And now let's really ramp it up. Let's talk about Matt Rhule. Boy, you can tell this guy was a son of a preacher man. Man, this guy was talking like a pastor. Oh, my God. It was great to listen to. Just see the passion in Matt Rhule. And you talk about winning a press conference. Winning on day one, Matt Rhule, I believe, did that. Look, it kind of started. Trev Alberts, I believe he's one of the more confident. He's one of the better speakers in terms of athletic director. When you see go up and do a press conference like this, Trev Alberts really gets out the message of what he wanted. And we've been hearing Trev Alberts say this on a radio programs in Nebraska, saying he wants toughness, he wants physicality, he wants to get back to the days where Nebraska was the toughest team at the line of scrimmage. Like how many, I don't know if I've ever heard the phrase line of scrimmage so many times, not during a football broadcast, not during an actual football game. And that's what Matt Rhule came in to do. Like he came in and he specifically said, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to be tough. We're going to have a physical mentality and we're going to win the line of scrimmage. Like that is exactly what Matt Rhule was saying at this press conference. And maybe there was more to win over at Nebraska because of their struggles as of late. Like Wisconsin probably had one of the worst seasons you'll probably see a Badger team play, and they went 6-6. Like they're still going to go to a bowl game. Nebraska, I think, is in a tougher spot, and Nebraska kind of needs more of a reboot than Wisconsin did. So and I think that's the personality of Matt Rhule as well. You know, you got a lot of Husker fans drinking that Kool-Aid already, and we just ended the regular season. It's a long way till week 1 when the Gophers Minnesota matches up against the Nebraska Cornhuskers in week 1. But I like what I heard out of Matt Rhule. Line of scrimmage, because there has been a lot of times over the past however many years Scott Frost has been head coach that they have just been owned at the line of scrimmage. And talking about Scott Frost, I tweeted it during this press conference. Man, I thought Matt Rhule was the anti-Scott Frost in every single way, right? Scott is kind of a stoic guy, doesn't show a lot of emotion, and obviously he likes to throw the football around, and both on the field and off the field. And then you look at Matt Rhule, a charismatic guy, a guy that seems happy to be there. That's what I got. It's the anti-Scott Frost, and if you ask Nebraska fans out there, they'll take any bit of anti-Scott Frost that they can get. Let's warm up that Frost. So that's kind of what I got out of Matt Rhule. Look, you're not going to win any games on day one. You're not going to win any games by saying the right things at the press conference. But, especially with the players at the one with Luke Fickell, and I saw a picture of Casey Thompson in the building at the press conference for Matt Rhule. I think, based on what I've seen, based on the reaction, I think players are warming up to Matt Rhule a little bit more at Nebraska, a little bit more than Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. But, we're going to see a lot of transfer portal movement. We'll talk about that in just a minute. A lot of transfer portal movement. We're going to see that coming up. And I think the key for both of these guys, both Luke Fickell and Matt Rhule, keep as many guys as you can on your program, because depth will also be a pretty big question, a pretty big thing as well to try to, because if you get a lot of guys max exodus the program, you want to keep some players in place. You don't want to have to worry about that depth in there. So those are kind of my thoughts regarding Matt Rhule at Nebraska and Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, so we could finally maybe put that to bed. Going to get to some comments here today. Tyler O'Connor, thanks for watching. It will be interesting to see where these teams are in 3 years. Yeah, that's going to be, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I look at Matt Rhule like a rebuilder of programs. And remember, what we're likely going to have is one, for both Fickell and Rhule, 1 year of the Big Ten West. And then when the Trojans and the Bruins join in 2024, it is extremely likely that we go no divisions. So then what's going to be the expectations? Where are these programs going to be in year 2? I think if you're Matt Rhule or Luke Fickell, you want to get your team, you want to try to win the West in year 1, right? Iowa might be a little bit down. Illinois is kind of losing some things. So maybe you might be able to put a roster together that can go out and make it to Indianapolis in year 1. Wouldn't that be great? Not saying it will happen. I don't think it will. But year 2, I think, is the big thing. You want to really be on the right track of the program in year 2 when that conference is 16 teams battling it out, one division, that kind of thing. Now, that has not been confirmed, obviously, yet. We haven't heard that from Kevin Warren, the Big Ten office. That's still being discussed. At least that's the last time we heard it. They're discussing all kinds of options. That's what Kevin said at Big Ten basketball media days back in October. So we'll see if that happens. But by year 2, that's when we really want to see. And now we've seen, remember before it was 3 years, sometimes 4 years, you really see a program. And we still see that. But man, there's what Mel Tucker did. 2 years. I almost call that a year and a half. I almost call that COVID year a half a year. And look what Mel Tucker did, getting to 11 wins. Sometimes you strike gold in the transfer portal, and you got to put it all together to make a good football team. So where will these teams be in 3 years? It's kind of hard to tell, because what will be the scheduling? Is the Big Ten going to go to 10 conference games? There's so much uncertainty of what the schedule is going to be. Who are they going to play? How tough is it going to be? What is success? I think that's another thing both Badger and Husker fans need to realize. Okay, what do you want? What is a successful season? Okay, I think the expectations might be different. Badger fans think, we just need a quick reset. We're a good team. Okay, we went pretty recently. We went to Big Ten championship games. We won the West Division in 2019, right? Even last year was a little bit of a down year, and we won 8 games. We just need a quick reset, and then we'll be back on the right track. We got a really good running back in Braylon Allen. We got a really good player. For Nebraska, what is your expectations? I think both, expectations year 1 for Nebraska might be, let's get to a bowl game. But Wisconsin's already at that level. They're 6-6. Their expectations now might be 7, 8, 9 wins. So I think you got to ask each fan base what the different expectations are. So where will these teams be in 3 years? Should be interesting to find out. John Hamilton checking in. Nebraska needed a guy who understands the line of scrimmage. Exactly. How many times in recent years has Nebraska been in 3rd and long on offense, 3rd and short on defense, right? Maybe average it out. You get to 3rd and medium, and maybe it's manageable either way. Line of scrimmage, so big, and I think you're really seeing that at Nebraska. With this hire, Trev Alberts has said it. I want a guy who can control it. Look at how you win in the Big Ten. Look at Ohio State, Michigan this last week, last 2 years. Tough line of scrimmage, better offensive line, wins the football game. Okay, all these offense, points, wide receivers, it looks great. It looks great against Arkansas State. It looks great against, I shouldn't say Northwestern, because it didn't look great against Northwestern. It looks great against Indiana. But when you really get to the big boys in the Big Ten, it hasn't really gone well. So that's kind of what I think of right there. Dave Valensky checking in. I don't care who the Nebraska coach is going to be. If you can't recruit Texas, you're going to be in trouble. They talked about recruiting a little bit during the introductory press conference. I saw I tuned in a little bit. Nebraska had a much better live stream on YouTube than Wisconsin did. I'm gonna say that right off the bat from a technical audio video standpoint. So I'm just gonna say that. But they had Joel Klatt on before the Nebraska press conference, and he said Nebraska can recruit nationally. You're in a situation in the Big Ten, a lot of Big Ten teams have to recruit nationally. Only USC and UCLA, which aren't even in the conference yet, they can stick at home and put together a Big Ten championship type of roster. You can't do that in Indiana. You can't do it in Ohio. You can't do it in Michigan. You can get decent players. There's just not enough great players to formulate a really good team. So Nebraska needs to recruit nationally. Yes, reestablishing that pipeline in Texas. Maybe Matt Rhule has some connections from when he was the head coach at Baylor still. Remains to be seen. And recruiting, obviously, that leads to Mickey Joseph. They didn't really have a firm stance on Mickey Joseph, so we might be hearing more about that in the future. Our buddy Dennis Young, Husker fan, checking in. Kool-Aid is already being downed by Husker fans all around the globe. So that should be interesting as well. A lot of talk about Scott Frost. I'm sure Husker fans don't really want to talk about it. Don't really want to talk about that much anymore right now. We talk about expectations. Dennis, checking in once again. 9 months to build, 8-4. That's lofty. I will say this. If you look back at my Twitter, I did preseason picks. I don't feel great saying this, but I picked Nebraska to go 8-4 this year. So, once again, don't feel great about that, but hey, you get Casey on the right track. You actually get a few offensive line. Like, someone commented on a YouTube video, and they talked about the offensive line, how there hasn't been much development there. Like, you got a guy that Turner Corcoran came in. He was a 4-star guy, I believe, out of Council Bluffs, just across the river from Omaha. He came in. I think there was a lot of expectations for him, but he's been moving around. He's been kind of bouncing around to positions and hasn't really stuck on that offensive line. You need to develop offensive linemen. I think that needs to get better there. So that's kind of where that seems right now. Johnny Ballgame. Big Ten Johnny checking in. Ed Orgeron maybe at an assistant position at Nebraska. Seems like a good place for that. Of course, he has some experience as a defensive line. I believe it was defensive line coach as well. So yeah, he's kind of been a guy that's kind of just been floating, kind of been floating around there. So we'll see if Ed Orgeron comes up somewhere. Dennis picked the Huskers at 9-3. So I had Minnesota winning the division, I think, at 9-3. Bunch of teams at 8-4. I think I had earlier here today. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Rhule and Fickell situations. We can put it to bed, but as it pertains to Wisconsin and Nebraska with coaches, there's going to be a lot of transfer portal movement, and you know where to track transfer portal movement. It's right here. Speaking of transfer portal movement, our buddy Big Ten Johnny mentioned that before, and I am trying to find the comment. And naturally now I can't find it. There it is. Former Wisconsin wide receiver Marcus Allen committing to Minnesota today. Saw that on Twitter. Marcus Allen was, third-ish on the depth chart at Wisconsin. I think he's a good player. Can he develop into a good player at Minnesota with a couple of years of remaining eligibility that he has left? So we're going to transition from that transfer portal talk. That takes us into another transfer portal discussion. And maybe the biggest name to enter the transfer portal so far, and that's Cade McNamara. Cade McNamara is in the transfer portal. Can he benefit a team? Can he take a team to the next level? And which teams can he do that with? There are some Big Ten teams that I believe can utilize the services of Mr. Cade McNamara. Now, when you talk about Cade McNamara, you have to answer a couple of questions. What box do we need to keep Cade McNamara in? We need a good running game. I think that's the first thing. And we need a good offensive line. Like, if you're looking for a guy to come in and just make everybody better around him, receivers, backs, all that stuff, Cade McNamara ain't your guy. This is a guy that needs to have a foundation in place. He's a game manager type. Look, and one thing he does well is he protects the football. You need a tough physical team. I think that's the box that Cade McNamara fits into. So let's take a look at some options for Big Ten teams that should call Cade McNamara, that should inquire about the former Big Ten champion quarterback. Let's start first with the hot option out there, and that's the Iowa Hawkeyes. Okay, when we look at the box, right, that we mentioned before, that Cade McNamara needs to be in, we have to mention first Caleb Johnson. Right, Caleb Johnson emerged in the latter part of the year, and this running game really got going for the Iowa Hawkeyes as things went along. So they have the running game. I believe in the future, Caleb Johnson is their guy for the next couple of years behind the line. Now let's talk about that offensive line. Young offensive line this year, shuffling around. It got a little bit better as the season went along, but maybe not a whole lot better. Now, Caden Proctor is a big part of this, right? If he can come in next season, and if he could be the best recruit in Iowa history, and he comes in and he's a starter from day one, and he is as good as they say he is, 5-star guy, local guy out of the Des Moines area, I believe, that could sure up some holes on that offensive line. And we know about Iowa's defense. Look, even though they're going to lose some guys, this is still a Phil Parker defense. Iowa seems to be a good destination for Cade McNamara. But if you dive into it a little bit more, you got to ask yourself, why would Cade McNamara go to the Iowa Hawkeyes? Right? We know the issues about Brian Ferentz. Okay, so is Cade McNamara a guy right now that wants to play in a Brian Ferentz offense? Better question might be, who wants to play in a Brian Ferentz offense? A Brian Ferentz offense that has continued to take steps down over the years that he has been the offensive coordinator over there. And another big question has to be, what will your better wide receivers and playmakers stay in Iowa City? Remember, Charlie Jones did not transfer to Purdue until after spring ball. Okay, you got a guy right here in Keegan Johnson who might play in the bowl game but did not play during the entire regular season. Was probably going to be Iowa's top wide receiver. What happens if he transfers after Cade McNamara gets there? Now Cade doesn't have a lot of guys to throw to. Okay, that's what I fear, is that Keegan Johnson is going to see what Charlie Jones did at Purdue, becoming one of the best receivers in the Big Ten Conference. Even to a lesser extent, seeing what Tyrone Tracy did as well, being involved in that offense as well. Why can't Keegan Johnson transfer somewhere else where there's a better passing attack where his skills can be on display? All of those questions need to be answered before Cade McNamara makes a big-time commitment to the Iowa Hawkeyes. What about the Wisconsin Badgers? Okay, you got a new coach coming in, Graham Mertz. He's probably done in Madison. It checks one of the boxes. Braylon Allen, right? You've got one of the very best running backs in the Big Ten. Look at how Cade McNamara really was when you had Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum behind him, right? And you got a guy right now in Braylon Allen that's one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. Now, the big thing about that is going to be keeping Braylon Allen in Madison, Wisconsin, with all of the turnover. The offensive line isn't what it usually is in Madison, and I think that could maybe be a concern right now for what's happening at the University of Wisconsin. And what will the team look like? Is this going to be a team that fits with Cade McNamara? What are they going to have at the receiver position? We talked about Marcus Allen is not going to be in Madison, Wisconsin, as he's transferred out to Minnesota. What are the wide receiver options going to look like? Because I believe that's going to make Cade McNamara a better quarterback, is his talent around him. And that leads me to my last option, the Illinois Fighting Illini. Out of all of these options, Illinois probably has the best receiving core. You look at Isaiah Williams, good playmaker. You look at Pat Bryant, who's been one of my favorite young wide receivers. Both of those guys are sophomores, will be juniors. Then you look at a couple of juniors that will be seniors, assuming they stick around, Casey Washington and Brian Hightower. You look at these receivers for Illinois, and these are guys, you got guys all across the formation that I think Cade McNamara can throw to. Now, I look at Tommy DeVito, grad transfer type of guy. You look at Tommy DeVito and you look at Cade McNamara, and are we doing the Spider-Man meme? We're pointing back and forth at each other? I don't think Tommy and Cade McNamara are terribly different. There were times Tommy went down the field and made plays, but for the most part, he managed the game when Chase Brown was running the ball. Now, obviously, Chase Brown probably not going to be there next year at Illinois, so it's going to have to be Reggie Love. It's going to have to be Josh McCray. Josh McCray was going to be a big 1-2 punch with Chase Brown, but injuries kind of riddled him this year. So maybe he'll step up. Reggie Love kind of did a good job as that number 2 back. So I believe Illinois checks the boxes, and when you look at a Brett Bielema offense, it kind of fits into what Cade McNamara wants to do, even dating back to Bert's days at Wisconsin. This is a guy that wants to run the ball. This is a guy that wants to be physical, and he doesn't put too much pressure on his quarterback. There's a lot of Cade McNamara guys that he coached at Wisconsin, maybe outside of Russell Wilson. Why can't Cade McNamara be a Scotty Tolzien? Why can't he be that kind of a quarterback that leans on the running game, that leans on the defense? And remember, Scott Tolzien carried Wisconsin to a Rose Bowl. So I want to hear what you guys think. Where do you think Cade McNamara should end up going? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. All right, so let's talk about Cade McNamara now, because I think there's a lot of options out there. Rattler Sports Network kind of chiming in. Should Cade go to Iowa? They need a quarterback. It's a big question. That's what's being talked about right now. It started, I watched the live stream earlier today from Corey Bretta at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Great channel. All of the Iowa fans are probably already subscribed to him anyway. You know, and then the more national guys kind of brought it up. There's been a lot of steam for Iowa and Cade McNamara here right now. So I think that's a big thing. Dennis Young thinks Iowa's going to be in a rebuilding year. And I don't know if Cade McNamara wants to go to a situation where they're rebuilding. I think he wants to go in a place where he can win. Rattler Sports Network, more from there. Iowa with Cade, Caleb Johnson, and the Iowa defense. Like, here's something to think about. What happens if you put, this is a tough topic. It's a tough topic, and I'll get to more of this. What happens if you put Cade McNamara into this year's team? How much different is it? How many games do they flip? Do they flip Iowa State? Like, we've had the same conversations. A lot of Iowa fans are, well, what if we had Charlie Jones? What if he didn't transfer? You're still, like we talked about the box before, we're still within the box of Brian Ferentz. I think that's where it all comes down to. I think it's at the top where things kind of maybe aren't great right now. So, that's where things, and we're talking about the Big Ten. Maybe Cade McNamara ventures outside of the conference. Well, I would love to see him stay in the Big Ten. I think his style, his game manager style, pairs well with other Big Ten teams. But Tyler here chiming in thinking Cade has some coach connections to an SEC team out there. I'd love to hear. I'm not sure about the connection right off the top of my head, but that's kind of where Tyler's here is coming from. Also thinks Iowa might go 11-1. Tyler O'Connor not buying the Cade McNamara to Iowa hype. Want a big shout out. Going for gold 85 super chat. Appreciate it for that. For the rest of you guys, if you are interested in supporting the channel, the super chat is a great way to see it on a live streams where I see a lot of comments. It helps your comment stick out, so I make sure I can see it. Erica Goldberg. Brian is on the hot seat. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. I said this in previous live streams and videos. I thought Brian Ferentz, middle of the year, yeah, he should be gone. Gary Barter, step and do your job. But then he put together a couple of wins. And then now this Nebraska game kind of puts him down a little bit. I don't know, man. I really believe if a move is going to be made, you got to think it's going to be soon, right? All these transfer portal things are going to hurry up. Like, what if they fire Brian Ferentz in a week right in the midst of all this transfer portal stuff? Then you don't have an OC. I think you're in a worse situation maybe at that point than you would be with whoever. Iowa's wide receivers. Erica Goldberg, thanks for tuning in. Iowa's wide receivers don't look good because they don't get enough passes thrown to them. See, that's a solid point. Appreciate the comment, Erica, because you kind of I want to look at the Nebraska game, right? Alex Padilla comes in, just bam. Nope, we're going to run the ball. We don't trust you, Alex Padilla. What happened in the second half? They start to throw it a little bit more. Alex Padilla gains a little bit of confidence. Sometimes, and maybe that goes back to the play calling. I don't know. It's just maybe they didn't believe in Alex. It's like, well, we're behind by this much. We should probably throw the ball to try to get back in the game. So, yeah, I think it starts with the offense. It starts with the scheme. Iowa's a place where you can have good quarterback. You've had good quarterback play in the past, like even as recent as Nate Stanley. And then, of course, you go back to Brad Banks, who finished second in the Heisman race. What was that, 20 years ago, 2002? A magical year for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And then you look at Drew Tate. I mean, you've had good quarterbacks over the years that can do things. So it should be interesting. Me too, Mr. Rattler Sports Network. Hey, we're not in these huddles. We're just looking at it from the outside. Let's see. Mark Edwards chiming in, friend of the channel. Cade might head back to the West. His dad has connections with Nevada. He is from that area. You are correct. Maybe Cade McNamara says, I doubt this would happen, but what do you think? Do you think he'd go to a Mountain West school, a MAC school, and just absolutely tear it up? Right? And then you can throw 30, 40 touchdowns against lesser competition. Maybe it increases your chances of going to the NFL. Like, that's something I think that that needs to be talked about as well. Saw this comment on Twitter from Blue Dove PDX. Oregon State, Western school, successful team in need of a better quarterback. And the Pac-12 right now, not exactly known for its defense. Oregon State might be an interesting bet. Oregon State head coach Jonathan Smith, I really thought he might be in some of these conversations for head coach. What he's done, And now, Stanford is an opening. Colorado, we'll see what happens with Deion Sanders. Maybe he could. But if he stays at Oregon State, that might be, he said, Cade McNamara might say, hey, maybe I have a better chance at opening it up at Oregon State than maybe playing against tougher defenses in the Big Ten or the SEC or the ACC or something like that. More from Blue Dove PDX, kind of what I said before. K to Iowa, a big no for this one with Brian Ferentz, or a big question mark about his replacement. Yeah, it's tough right now because remember, at Iowa, because of the conflict of interest, I believe, Iowa fans, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kirk Ferentz cannot fire Brian Ferentz. It's a Gary Barter decision, who is the athletic director at Iowa, that has to make that decision. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that is the scenario right now in Iowa City. So that's kind of where we are at right now. More from Erica Goldberg, thinking Cade would be a great get for Iowa. Not quite convinced they'll get him. Either way, we have to get another quarterback. So then if you can't get Cade McNamara, there was a quarterback. His last name Altmaier. He was at Ole Miss. He just entered the portal as well. I forgot his first name as well. He was in a quarterback battle with Jackson Dart at Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. So that could be another option for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa's got to look themselves in the mirror. And first thing they got to figure out is Brian Ferentz coming back. If Brian Ferentz is coming back, you got to find a guy that fits into that scheme. Okay, what is your scheme going to be? Are you going to try to ride Caleb Johnson as much as you can? Or are you going to try to bring in a quarterback that can provide you a more balanced offense? Okay, I think that's the case right now. Look, Alex Padilla, when you talk about Alex Padilla, he played a decent second half against Nebraska. And I honestly believe maybe the reason they didn't win that game is because they didn't throw the ball sooner with him. They weren't more balanced, so Nebraska could sell out in stopping the running game. If you're an Iowa fan, you got to be thinking that in the back of your head, that maybe, well, look at how Padilla played. Maybe that's going to – I think what they should do, because remember, you got Joey Labas back there as well. I think what you should do, bring in a transfer. Whether you think it's Alex Padilla, Joey Labas, no matter what you think, you need to bring in a transfer quarterback, okay, and compete for the job. If the transfer doesn't win, so be it. You tried, okay? Maybe he doesn't pan out, whatever. Maybe Alex Padilla impresses in camp, whatever. But they need to try. Like, ever since the transfer portal was instituted, Iowa has been towards the bottom of the Big Ten in utilizing the transfer portal. So, man, they got to do something. Like, the teams right now that don't utilize the portal are going to get left behind. Like, that's it. You're going to get left behind, because that's how you need to build a team. Like, it's not like the old days where you recruit a class and it's 3 or 4 years to really make things good. You can turn things around. You need to use it to your advantage. Same with name, image, and likeness. Like, that's what you want. Erica Goldberg, I'm going to assume you're an Iowa fan. I've wanted Padilla all season. I I felt bad. I said this in my Iowa-Ohio State recap video that Padilla got a raw deal when he went in. Was at the second half of that Ohio State game on the road, and they're up against it. It's like, I don't care who you are. You're not, with Iowa's offense and how they are, you're not going to have a successful. He should have replaced Spencer Petras long before that, even though Petras played a little bit better down the stretch. Yeah, Padilla, I said this before as well. Like, the offensive line was not very good at Iowa this year. And Padilla, and I think some people even, said this last year. Padilla offers that mobility that Spencer Petras doesn't. Spencer Petras is like a statue, essentially, right? And Alex Padilla provides a little bit of mobility, rolling out, even though Spencer Petras got a little bit, he was okay, kind of on the run and rolling out in some instances. But Padilla's a little bit more mobile. He adds a little bit different aspect to the offense, a lot like, Ethan Kaliak-Manis is doing at Minnesota. Big Ten Johnny's favorite player, by the way. So that's kind of where Padilla maybe had a little bit of an advantage. Okay, and today, like, this isn't college football of 1990, 1980. Like, this is a situation where you need, you need a quarterback to move around, even if it's rolling out. Like, even if he's a pocket passer, he needs to be able to roll out, and he needs to be able to make plays with his legs. Now, Blue Dove PDX brings up a good point. What about Cade McNamara? Okay, not the most mobile guy in the world. I think he's a little bit more mobile than a lot of people are more mobile than Spencer Petras. Am I more mobile than Spencer Petras? Check me out on the play fake and the rollout. 10 yards, move the chains, baby. Sixth grade backup quarterback for the Fond du Lac Hawks. You're looking at him. But, I would, we'll see, is that going to be, if once again, it all comes back to Brian Ferentz. Like, that is the big key of where Iowa goes in 2022. I honestly believe if they can get a quarterback in there, this is a team like this year. If you had a good quarterback, I'd have to go back and try to remember who are some transfer portal quarterbacks, like Casey Thompson, for example. You put Casey Thompson in the Iowa offense, what happens? But then again, we go back to who's calling the plays, who's calling the shots. It all comes back to leadership. Okay, we're making a really full circle type of deal here. Like, leadership was the problem for Nebraska. Okay? And leadership is why they are at where they're at. And the leadership calling plays at Iowa, and the leadership has kind of gotten them, and the nepotism has gotten them into this situation. Look, even going back, hiring your kid, I know he's been with the Iowa program. He was an offensive line coach. Brian had been with the program for a very long time, but I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, maybe recommend him to go somewhere else. I don't know. I just wouldn't want that on me if I were Kirk Ferentz. But that's just me. That's just me. More information from the Iowa faithful. We are also getting a mobile quarterback, Marco Leonis. I have to look him up. Next year, 3 to 4 star recruit, models his play after Brad Banks. And of course, obviously, everybody in Hawkeye Nation loves what Brad Banks brought to the table back in 2002. So that's a big thing. Look, Iowa has pieces. Like, you look at Caleb Johnson. Like, this is a running game. You put Proctor on that offensive line. You develop this offensive line a little bit more. I believe Iowa can have a really good running game. So then you got to focus out to the wide receivers. Okay? Is Keegan, if you can get Keegan Johnson back and build around him. I mean, I kind of like Deontay Vines was pretty good down the stretch. I think you got other guys that can complement Keegan if you can find those guys. If you can find those guys. I honestly believe you could have a pretty good time at Iowa. Look, this isn't an Iowa team that needs to be great offensively. I mention this a lot because it is one of the greatest, best podcasts out there for a Big Ten fan. If you listen to the Eyes on Big podcast, Jeffrey the Greek, former player at the University of Iowa, he came into the season saying in the preview that said, give me the 88th ranked offense in the country. If Iowa is the 88th ranked offense in the entire country, we might be able to do something. Well, they were 130 something? Yeah, that's not 88th. Like at Iowa, you need an average offense because Phil Parker, it is a friggin' shame, by the way, that he's not on the Broyles award list as one of the top assistant coaches in the entire country. Like you should put him on that list every friggin' year. Like that's just the way it is. That's how I feel. I'm kind of about Phil Parker. How's it going, Mr. Hero, Hummus Hero? Our resident Buckeye fan here on the channel just got here. A mannequin is more mobile than Spencer Petras. Could be. Could be. Kind of going through more comments here. Brian, or I should say Hummus Hero. I'm reading some comments above that about Brian Ferentz. Cade would be an upgrade, but they need to get him some more weapons to throw to. And that all starts with keeping Keegan Johnson in Iowa City. Like, you got to think right now Keegan's thinking, look at what Charlie Jones did. I can do that. Like, coming into the season, maybe Iowa fans can help me out here. Erica and a few others in the chat here right now. Preseason. You go back to spring ball. Charlie Jones. Like Charlie Jones, I knew was a good wide receiver. Didn't get he was more of a punt returner last year for the Hawkeyes. Coming into the season, was it Keegan Johnson or was it Charlie Jones? I thought it was Keegan Johnson that maybe would have been a notch up on the depth chart. Or I thought at the very least, they were pretty similar. So Keegan Johnson might look at that and think, well, if Charlie Jones can do it, I can do it. So that might be something to look at as well. One more note on Cade, according to Mark Edwards here. Cade at University of Michigan was behind the number one best offensive line in the country. That's why I mentioned offensive line at the top of this segment. Won the Joe Moore Award 2021 as the best offensive line, and they'll win it again this year, as they should, right? So, yeah, you need a good offensive line. So out of those options, like I gave you Iowa, I gave you Wisconsin, and I gave you Illinois. I don't know if any of those offensive lines are great right now, but if I'm, like you look at Wisconsin has had some issues. You look at Logan Brown was a 5-star guy on this offensive line. Apparently had some troubles. Ended up transferring to Kansas. So you need a good offensive line, and I think that's a big part. And remember, if we're talking about the Big Ten, like there's other teams I think that you could potentially discuss. Now I think Cade McNamara is going to want to go to a place where he can win. I don't think you can see Cade McNamara transferring to a school like Indiana or a Rutgers. I mean, watch now, he's definitely going to do it. But I mean, other schools to throw out there. What about a Michigan State? Like I don't think there's that much of an advantage maybe there's a lot of an advantage or any advantage of Cade McNamara over Peyton Thorne. Even though I think Michigan State could go in the portal for a quarterback, I just don't think I don't think Cade McNamara is that guy to replace Peyton Thorne right now. Talking a lot of Iowa football in the comments. Never too much Hawkeye football. I love watching Iowa football. Obviously, Big Ten Ted, this is the channel. I've been watching Big Ten football for 20 years. And I love smash mouth, good defense, that type of football. Like that Iowa-Minnesota 13-10 game is as entertaining as a 45-42 game. Like that game, that Iowa-Minnesota game 13-10, in my opinion, was just as entertaining as that Purdue-Nebraska shootout earlier in the season. So I just think it all depends what kind of football, what you grew up watching, that kind of thing. So never too much Iowa football, of course. Never too much of any Big Ten team here on the channel. So we greatly appreciate that. Just kind of skimming through some comments that I might have missed here earlier. A lot of talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes. A lot of statue stuff. Blue Dove PDX, not really liking what's going on with Brian Ferentz. Getting a new perspective in there might help as well. Okay, this question has been asked. I'm glad I scrolled back in the comments. This question has been asked a lot. Boss Hog. And now it's not showing up. There it is. Random question. But is Wisconsin the team you root for since you grew up there? I remember you mentioned that in a past video. I'm a Big Ten fan, and I know that's such a cop-out, right? It's such a cop-out. I'll kind of give you a background. Grew up in Wisconsin, kind of a short background, and then we'll kind of continue on here with the actual content. Grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up an hour north of Madison. Oh man, I've been to Madison, Wisconsin, maybe more than any other town that I've lived in the past. My parents, every single Saturday during the summer and as part of the fall, we had a small business where we sold fresh produce on the square in downtown Madison right before Badger games. So, the band would kind of do their thing and kind of pass by, and you'd be a part of the game day atmosphere, so to speak, even though Camp Randall is a decent walk away from the Capitol. But, man, I grew up in Wisconsin, like I said, to Madison. Wanted to go to Madison for a while, but then didn't really have the grades for it. So that's kind of what happened. Then eventually made my way to Minnesota, and that's kind of where I live now. I like the Gophers. I'm more of a PJ Fleck fan than maybe a Gopher fan, and that might rile some people up, but I like with PJ. I think he's an inspirational guy. I think he's been a great representation here in the Twin Cities, regardless of what the Star Tribune continues to write about him. And then I've always liked Nebraska. Like going back, one of my fondest memories was watching that Eric Crouch receive a touchdown pass against Oklahoma in the year 2000, 2001. I think it was the 01 game, right? The year they went to the national championship. So I've always really been a Nebraska fan. I guess if you're looking for an answer, I'd probably go Nebraska. But I usually tend to keep this stuff on the down low, because overall, I've kind of had different periods where I've kind of been a fan of different teams. Like I said, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, all different kind of teams. But I love what each school brings to the Big Ten. There have been so many times growing up where I'm watching Penn State and Purdue, right, from 2007, when I'm growing up, and my parents say, "Why are you watching that? It's Big Ten football. Why not?" So that's kind of that story, and I'm sticking to it. I work with Big Ten Johnny on a weekly basis, and he's kind of has a hard time telling. So it's the whole Big Ten. I support the conference. Been watching this league for a long time, and man, I could talk about it till I'm blue in the face. So that's kind of how I feel about that. That kind of answers that question. So I appreciate the comments. More from Rattler Sports Network. Ted, do you think Iowa was bad this year? That's an interesting question. You asked me at different points in the season, and I probably would have given you 3 different questions. They were bad after the loss to Iowa State. Oh, man, but they weren't. Their offense was bad. Their defense was elite. Like, I haven't seen a team like that. I've been talking about how I've been watching Big Ten football for 20 years. I had never seen a team like this that is so imbalanced. I've never seen a football team like this. Usually, one unit is right around the other, but no, I've never seen a team like the Iowa Hawkeyes. And that's not a great thing. Man, that defense is outstanding. Like what Phil Parker is fantastic. Like, yeah, were they ever bad? I don't think they were a bad team because the defense kept them in games. The defense scored points. It's crazy these last 2 seasons. If you remember, if you've been watching the channel for a while, if you haven't, go back go to my channel, go to videos, and kind of scroll back a little bit. I called this Iowa defense last season the unicorn of college football. Okay? That was after the Maryland game, the Iowa-Maryland game where they absolutely destroyed Maryland on a Friday night. They were the unicorn of college football. And I still think that defense is. The way they force turnovers and continue to score points. At some point, they were relying on their defense to score points last season and this season. But man, it was crazy how much Iowa. I really thought they'd be better this year. I really thought they'd improve at least a little bit. But man, it's just, I don't think they were ever bad. But man, they were relying on that defense a lot, weren't they? Man, they were relying. Erica Goldberg says, since you like PJ, how do you feel about the fans who were wanting him gone after? Oh gosh, oh man. Can open. Worms. How are you feeling about fans who want him gone? Also, how do you feel about his presser? He took things a little bit personally after that Wisconsin presser. Like this, man, I'm getting revved up now. Man, that press conference, you can tell, like he's been a pretty even-keeled guy. He always says, hey, you got a job to do, I got a job to do, whatever. But this media, like, you're the Minnesota Golden Gophers. You're not Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Hell, you're not Michigan State. You're not Wisconsin. Like, well, now the last 2 years, you're kind of turning into that program. But I'm saying historically, like you talk about the media, you talk about the fans. Like he went 8-4, and I'm still seeing reporters, local reporters in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area that quote a tweet and say, because I think he said recently that the administration says if you continue to beat Wisconsin, you'll be here forever, right? And then someone quoted, I thought at your introductory press conference you said you wanted to win national championships and conference championships. Give me a freaking break. Like, it's a lot of coach speak, and you talk almost everybody that goes to a press conference is going to say, yeah, we want to win championships. Like, if you're not happy at Minnesota winning 8 games, then you shouldn't be a Gopher fan. Like, I'm sorry. Like, this is not a bad season. Like, you need, I hate to say this, to say you should have more realistic expectations, but how about we put Tim Brewster back in there? See how you like that. Like, man, like if you continue to beat Wisconsin, like I know Iowa's been the bugaboo for PJ Fleck, just like Jim Harbaugh had a bugaboo in Ohio State. Like there have been a lot of people. I might be wrong on this, but Tom Osborne I think he had problems with Oklahoma when he was first there. I could be wrong on that. And then they eventually, like sometimes some coaches in some schools don't mesh well together. Is PJ going to eventually beat Iowa? Probably, maybe one time. But man, it's just like, you got to know who you are at some point. You're not, especially with this new Big Ten, you're not going to be in that category. Okay? Like PJ Fleck's done a good job developing. You're not going to be able to recruit at that level. And to get to that level, you need to recruit elite and you need to develop elite. So for all these people and all these fans and reporters calling for PJ, you've set the expectations at 8 wins. That alone should get PJ Fleck a statue. Like, what he's done raising the bar for that program and the national perspective of this program has been great. Look, you can say what you want. You can say he's got a big ego. It's all about him. You can say that's I think, a different discussion for a different day. But you look at on-the-field results. Like, you have an 11-win season, to your credit, developing NFL wide receivers, developing NFL guys like an Antoine Winfield, like developing a guy like Muhammad Ibrahim that could play running back in the NFL for 10 years. Like, man, you want to go back to the way it was? You want to go back to Jerry Kill? You want to go back to Tim Brewster? Be my guest. kind of went off there, but that's honestly how I feel. Thank you, Big Ten Johnny, for the super chat. Very much appreciate that. Once again, if you want to support the channel, super chat is the way to do it, and that's kind of how I feel about that. No problem. No problem. I'm here to answer questions. That's what I'm here to do. More from Mark Edwards. No, Erica, you are fine. You are fine. I like getting riled up. I like, this is what it's all about. This is why, like, you talk about, this is my passion. This is why I started this channel, because I'm passionate about these kinds of things. I just think it's crazy that people here in Minnesota, like, I live here. I'm Huntington Bank Stadium is 20 minutes that way. Like, you know, I listen to it on the radio. I dial up K-Fan, which is a big sports talk station in the area. And it just boggles my mind that people, you're Minnesota. Like, what have you done as a sports city? I don't know. Okay, moving on. Moving on. Let's see. Mark Edwards. Thanks for the question. Objectively, oh boy. I see this one already. Who had the better team in 1997, Nebraska or Michigan? Remember, objectively, if that's possible, remember Woodson won the Heisman Trophy that year. To put it into perspective, I was 6 years old that year. So all I have to go off of, and I go back in the off season, and especially after basketball ends, which we're still going to get to some basketball, believe it or not, at the end of this program. But when I look at this 1997 team, I watched them a lot on film, of course. I look at, remember Scott Frost was the quarterback of that football team. You still had a lot of remnants from what might be the greatest team of all time back in 1995 at Nebraska. That's such a great debate, personally, and I would have loved to see it on the field. You know, I would probably go, I think Michigan is maybe a little bit more balanced. I think when you take a look at the best player on the field in that matchup, it probably would have been Charles Woodson, you know, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I really think, I think it would have been Michigan, and I don't think it would have been much. It would have been interesting to see that option attack from Tom Osborne go up against that Michigan team, and how that, I thought Michigan was more balanced. Nebraska, though, that option, though, was that I formation option was extremely difficult to stop. Scott Frost was okay. He wasn't Tommy Frazier, you know, but yeah, it'd be very interesting. If I had to take one, I'd probably take Michigan because of their balance from that 1995. Big Ten Johnny coming in, kind of going back to the BJ Fleck. Look what he did with Mo Ibrahim. Like, yeah, that's all you need to say. Big time thank you to Dave Valensky. Thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. I'm not totally happy with PJ, but as a Gopher fan, it's nice to have PJ as a coach. Expectations should be a lot higher this season, especially winning the West. Like, this was a team after that big Michigan State win. I definitely thought this was a Gopher team that should have won the West. And injuries got in their way. When Chris Altman-Bell went down, you really saw what was beneath him at wide receiver. If I'm willing to make a prediction that if Chris Altman-Bell is healthy for the entire season, this team's probably winning the West Division. Like, I think that was when that happened, that was the big missing piece. And you saw that now teams, like you saw how Muhammad Ibrahim continue to run the ball. If you would have added a piece like Chris Altman-Bell into that offense all year long, I think it would have been a different story. I'll say that. With Chris Altman-Bell in that Minnesota team. Would be very interested to see, Dave, where you're kind of at, why you're not totally happy with PJ. And a lot of the thing is, a lot of times you get used to that. They say in other forms of media, you pop a rating. You pop a big season. They got 11 wins right off the bat. Like, this is a program like where you're going to have ups and downs. Like Purdue is going to be 6-6, 5-7, 7-5. Ooh, then they might shoot up to 9 or 10 wins. It's hard to maintain that type of success in the Big Ten, and it will be harder to maintain that type of success in the Big Ten kind of going forward if you're a Minnesota, if you're a Northwestern. So We'll see. You're going to play tougher competition, but it should be interesting to see if PJ continues. Like, I think he's been fine. I think he's been good. We're getting into a situation now where fans might be getting a little antsy and saying, "Well, we've gotten this. Now we want this. Now we want more. We want to get back to that. We want to win 9 games. We want to win 10 games every season." This next season for PJ Fleck at Minnesota is going to be a very interesting season because no Mo, no Tanner. How good is Ethan Kaliakmanis going to be? Is Chris Ottman-Bell going to stay? Or is Chris Ottman-Bell going to be like, he looks around and says, maybe I want to transfer and go to a contender? That's something to look at well. But once again, thank you for the Super Chat, Dave. Very much appreciate that. Hummus Hero checking in once again. Can't wait to see the bowl matchups for teams like Iowa, Minnesota, Purdue, Maryland. Bowl season. We're going to have some bowl previews here on the channel. I'm sure we'll have some live stream talking about those bowl matchups once they are out. There's a lot of solid teams in the Big Ten. Like, you got a lot of 8-4, 7-5 type of teams. Hummus Hero looking at Iowa, 7 wins. You're looking at Minnesota, 8 wins. You're looking at Purdue, 8 wins. You're looking at Maryland, 7 wins. You're looking at solid football teams. We've seen them all year for the past 9 or 10 weeks match up Big Ten on Big Ten. And now comes the really, when we talk about the national narrative about the conference, how do they match up with SEC teams in like the ReliaQuest Bowl? Bring back the Outback. When you match up against the Citrus Bowl, you see a lot of these Big Ten SEC matchups. Everybody talks about the SEC and how good they are. We're going to find out just how much the Big Ten really stacks up against them. Really appreciate the comments. Some good discussion going on. Erica, you and I held the same thought that Minnesota was going to win the West this year. Kind of quickly going back to the 1997 question. It's not a fair question. It's hard. The correct answer, they tied. Shared national championship, and every Ohio State fan reminds me of that. So, yeah, that's the age-old question. Who did I see this on Will Compton's Twitter? I thought somebody said this, that the Michigan and Nebraska should be a trophy game, and it should be like a replica of like a 1997 national championship trophy. That would be very, very interesting. More from Erica. Would like to ask about Northwestern. Will they have a better season next year? I hope so. Win a game in the United States. You look at recruiting rankings. I looked at those recruiting rankings today. Northwestern is in the upper half of the conference. Like, Northwestern has a good freshman class coming in. I think that could be a destination for a quarterback. Like, I'm not saying you're going to attract the best quarterback to Evanston, Illinois, because you're not. But they need to go into the portal. Like, Ryan Helinski was a transfer quarterback from South Carolina. That really didn't end up very well. I want to see them go into the portal. I believe Evan Hull, he was a sophomore this year. I think he'll be a junior, if I'm not mistaken. Played high school here. Played high school football here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area for the Maple Grove Crimson. Always like to mention that when I talk about Evan Hull. That's a team that appears to be recruiting really pretty well with Pat Fitzgerald, but they need better transfers coming in. It all starts with the quarterback. It all starts with the offense, right? This has never been a Northwestern team that has won pretty. They've won ugly. They've won the Big Ten way. They've won with defense. They've won with the running game. Okay. It's been a while since they've really had a playmaker at the quarterback position. Could you go all the way back to Kane Coulter? I don't know if you guys remember him. He was kind of a speedy guy that could throw the football down the field as well, kind of in the early to mid 2010s. If Northwestern, look, I still think Pat Fitzgerald is a good head coach. They need to build Pat Fitzgerald a statue in front of that new stadium, in front of that renovated stadium. Like, will they improve? Got to see what happens in the portal. Like, I can't sit here and say right now as of November 28th, and I can't sit here and say this team's going to be this good or this. We got portal, which according to sources is going to be freaking crazy this year. We got early signing day, later signing day in February. We'll see. I know people don't like that answer, but it's the truth. Usually get to me after this first really wave of transfers. And then I think we can really lay down something here. More questions. Man, we're doing it tonight. Really appreciate that. Joseph Ford coming in. The question is, who would go to Minnesota that is better than PJ? You read my freaking mind. We're on the same wavelength, Mr. Ford. It's not a destination job, but a place to build a name and jump. Seems like PJ is very content. Look, I talked about this. I honestly think PJ Fleck is on a team in a situation. Remember, we talk about traditions in college football. We talk about dotting the I at Ohio State. We talk about the banner at Michigan. We talk about traditions. Why can't roll the boat be the Minnesota tradition? Why can't people come to Minnesota to be a part of the roll the boat culture? Like, I honestly think PJ Fleck and Minnesota are almost merging into each other. Not a lot of programs would like what PJ's selling right now, right? Some people, some naysayers, always bigger than the program. Like, PJ Fleck kind of is the program. Like, Minnesota had no notoriety before this. They're what I call the flyover program, right? Minnesota, yeah, who cares? Whatever. They're a fine team. Lawrence Maroney, Marion Barber, whatever. Eric Decker, sure. But now recruits across the country, national guys can say, oh, yeah, let's throw the boat. That's PJ Fleck. He flies and jumps on his players after big wins. You know what I mean? Like, they're at the least, love them or hate them, there's an identity with Minnesota Golden Gopher football. So that's kind of how I feel about that. Yeah, the grass, it's not greener. Who are you going to get that's better than PJ? Who are you going to get that's going to come to Minnesota? Okay, he's made that program his own. His own. So, yeah, it's getting crazy. More from Hummus Hero. Yeah, Northwestern's investing into football, right? The new stadium, even though the stadium's going to be smaller, but yeah, they're investing into facilities, and you need to invest into facilities. To really, I think I got a response here from Dave. I don't have anything against Fleck. I just feel he's wandered. Did I read that right? An opportunity. I meant maybe squandered. An opportunity when he lost to Purdue, Illinois, in a very beatable Iowa. I'm really excited about our quarterback in the future. You should be excited, regardless of what Big Ten Johnny says, about Ethan Kaliak-Manis. He showed his passing ability in that game against Wisconsin. Really did really good. And if they can get Chris Hartman-Bale to stay in Minnesota, I think, and obviously the transfer with Marcus Allen, I think things could really be. But you look at those games against Purdue, that was the game where Muhammad Ibrahim was out. And that's basically their whole offense. Like, look what happened last year when Muhammad Ibrahim wasn't there. They didn't really have much of an offense at times. Illinois, I thought, maybe was a little bit of a better team. And then Iowa should have won that game. Muhammad Ibrahim hangs onto the football. They at the very least, they go. The very least, I got to pull up that comment from Erica. That's a good one. At the very least, they go into overtime. Okay, who knows? They probably win the game because they're going right down the field. This is a good one. Let's send Brian Ferentz. Imagine if we could send coaches to the portal. Oh, imagine that. That's a good one. I really like that. Who would pick up? Where would Brian Ferentz transfer to? I'm not sure if my buddies used to work in Fargo. I'm not even sure if my buddies at North Dakota State and the FCS would take him. Now, where are we going to send Brian Ferentz? Mark is saying Brian and Kirk. Ooh. Yeah, some Iowa fans not crazy about Kirk Ferentz right now either. So, yeah, there you go. Mark Edwards, what are your thoughts on the outcome of the game? Surprises, disappointments? Look, Ohio State doesn't have a problem, or maybe they just have a Michigan problem. I put out a tweet today. Ryan Day is 1-2 against Michigan, 31-0 versus the rest of the Big Ten. That's freaking insanity, right? That's crazy to think about that. But what are my thoughts? This is Michigan's conference now. Like Michigan, we've been talking about it for so long, right? Jim Harbaugh was so close, couldn't beat Ohio State, couldn't win a New Year's Six game, during those teams before 2020. And now he's done it 2 times in a row, the same way, running the ball, being physical, the exact way that he wants to play football. Like he's doing it his way. Now the only thing for Jim Harbaugh is, can you transfer that success to the college football playoff? And this year, I think they get a good shot. Obviously it's Georgia. Everybody's looking up at Georgia right now. Can they win a rematch? But Ohio State, what do you got to do, man, to get more physical? Like, you proved it even in the first half of that game. When you run the ball, good things happen. Like, even in the past with Urban Meyer. Like, Urban Meyer is kind of the czar of the spread option offense. And a big part of the spread option offense that Urban Meyer started all the way back in his days at Bowling Green was the run game. It's running the football out of a spread formation, limiting the amount of linebackers and people in the box so we can take advantage of the run game. Like, look at his Florida teams with Tebow and Percy Harvin and Rainey. I mean, this is a team that ran the football. Ohio State seems to be getting away from that at times and almost going to an air raid style. You need to be able to run the football to win football in the Big Ten. Like, that's just it. I think this Ohio State team, whether it's coaching staff, personnel, I don't know what it is, they need to have a more concerted effort to be better in the running game. Because if they're not better in the running game, I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about that. But Michigan recruits well. They don't recruit as good as Ohio State, but they develop better than anybody, man. Jim Harbaugh's that dude. Here we go. We got a destination for Brian. How about Hope College, Holland, Michigan, Division III. We could also send him to the MIAC here locally. Hey Johnny Football, Johnny Big Ten, is Bethel looking for an offensive coordinator here in the MIAC? Yeah, the WIAC as well, Wisconsin's Division III conference that has Wisconsin Whitewater, where Lance Leipold came from. For those of you out there, Mark Edwards hitting us with some facts. Did you know that Michigan is the only team to have 2 top 10 wins this season? And still, they're not ranked number 1. I thought they should be ranked number 1. That's just me. That's just my opinion. But I know Georgia, defending champ, they got to be up there. So I get it. Let's see it from the Ohio State side of things. The rivalry pendulum has definitely swung in Michigan's favor. Honestly, I forgot until these last 2 games what a terrible feeling it is to lose a game. It's been so long. Yeah, I don't think Ohio State's far away. Like, Ohio State, what have we seen from this team? This is a team that throws the football well. They do really good on the offensive line. Like, that's, I think, where they recruit well. They recruit well at wide receiver, and they recruit well on the defensive line. They need to get better at the secondary, and they need to get better at running the football. Like, they need to get better at being physical. They need to be a more balanced team. They need to be a more balanced offense. It's going to be crazy to think that C.J. Stroud is not going to go to a Big Ten championship. He's not going to win a game against Michigan. That's crazy. That's insane. That might be the way it goes down. Yeah, we're all about the MAC. That's maybe my second favorite kind. I'm all about the MACtion. A Bowling Green reference. Yeah, that's where he started. Did I look this up? I used to be big into the X's and O's of something. There was some I thought I printed out. This was like 15 years ago. Maybe I was in high school or whatever. I printed out a playbook. I think it was posted online. There was like a PDF of the Bowling Green playbook. I don't know if I have that. I might have it back at my house in Wisconsin or somewhere. But yeah, it's somewhere. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started, over at Bowling Green. More from Hummus here about the running game. The thing is, we're running the ball just fine in the game. It's just they can't seem to balance the play calling to make it matter. Would Ohio State get into a situation where they bring in a separate offensive coordinator, they get some offensive help? So Ryan Day, I don't think we've gotten to that point to strip play calling away from Ryan Day. But we'll see. Yeah, they were going in the first half with Chip Traynham, who had, 1 carry for 9 yards entering that game? Crazy. I think a big part of it was the injuries this year, right? Mayan Williams. Travion Henderson really didn't have the year. He was banged up. I think the injuries really hurt Ohio State. They were banged up early in this season, and I think that really plagued them kind of as the year went on. Let's see what we got here from Snick. Folks are so focused on immediate success, plug and play. Bunch of people were calling for Harbaugh's head to hire who? Exactly. Like, Jim Harbaugh is one of the best coaches in the country. And yeah, maybe he doesn't have a good season. 2020, COVID was a crazy year for everybody. That 2020 year was a insane for me, you, and Jim Harbaugh. But, we've gotten to a situation, we're in a situation where, and there's more pressure, especially on those big name coaches. You're not going to fire Ryan Day. You're not going to do that. You need to make adjustments. Ohio State needs to go into this offseason literally thinking, how do we beat Michigan? We can beat everybody else in the Big Ten Conference. How do we beat Michigan? If we beat Michigan, we're undefeated. That's it. How do we beat Michigan? That's what Ohio State needs to focus on this offseason. Okay. Getting me fired up. I love it. Day was so upset at how Iowa's defense was beating them in the first half. I've heard this before too. They were very physical with the Ohio State wide receivers. Some might have said a little bit too physical. But Iowa did exactly what you need to do against Ohio State's wide receivers. You need to be physical. You need to try to limit their speed and not let them get out in the open. Now, eventually, as this game went on, the dam broke. Iowa's offense couldn't balance. Iowa's defense was out there for too long, and eventually they hit big plays. So that's where it's at right now. Really good comments here tonight. Very interesting comment here from Rattler Sports Network that Purdue has the most wins against top 10 teams in their history. Very interesting. Talking about the big Rattler Sports Network also chiming in on the Big Ten Championship, thinking if Charlie Jones goes off, I have Purdue. Good luck going up against Mike Sanders still on that secondary, and that secondary. It's a very good secondary right now. Just looking at more comments here. Looks like we covered a lot of what we were kind of talking about before. Really appreciate you guys coming on board here tonight. Hoping to do more live streams on a more regular basis here in the future. Some good talk here tonight. More from Mark Edwards. Harbaugh's issues wasn't winning back in 18-19. It was beating top 10 schools, right? It was getting past some of those better teams. You're right. I think Harbaugh was 1-10 versus top 10 teams. And so now Harbaugh's proven he can beat Ohio State. Harbaugh's proven he can beat Penn State. Harbaugh's proven he can beat those good teams in the Big Ten. You got the Big Ten figured out. Go beat Georgia. Go beat USC. Go beat some of these teams in the college football playoff. Go win a natty. Go win a national championship. That's where it's at. Second stream in a row, we've got a 1976 reference from the Purdue Spoilermakers defeating Michigan all the way back then. Love that Big Ten history. So lots of good comments, lots of good discussion here on a Monday night. Greatly appreciated here. Going to kind of go to our last topic here of the night, and we are going to transition from football to basketball because it is that time. It's hybrid season here on the channel. It's hybrid season on Big Ten 10. Big matchup coming up this week, the Indiana Hoosiers and the North Carolina Tar Heels. So we've got a huge matchup between Indiana and North Carolina on the court, but it's not as big of a matchup as maybe it looked like it was going to be. North Carolina was the number one team in the country before they suffered back-to-back losses to both Iowa State and Alabama. Now, although this game may have lost its luster just a little bit, this is still a game that is still going to be really good and still is going to matter a lot at the end of the season. So when you break this one down, I think both of these teams have really good backcourts, and I think you got to start with the North Carolina Tar Heels and what they have. Man, this is kind of like an old North Carolina team. They like to run and gun. They like to get up and down the floor. I look at R.J. Davis, 6-foot point guard. Man, he's good. He can shoot from the outside. He can create off the bounce, and what he is able to do creating off the dribble, he does so many things. He kind of reminds me of a Ty Lawson, if you kind of remember him from the mid-2000s or so at North Carolina. He leads the charge in the fast break. This is a North Carolina team that wants to play tempo. This is a North Carolina team that wants to get up and down, right? You look at a lot of other guys on this North Carolina team as well. You look at Caleb Love on the outside as well. This is a team that is guard-oriented. This is a team that wants to get involved and is heavy with the guard play. Now, the big question about this matchup is, how does Indiana combat that? Well, if you kind of look at Indiana's guards, versus North Carolina's guards, they've got the size matchup. You look at Big Ten preseason player of the year, Trace Jackson Davis, 6'9". You look at Race Thompson, who's kind of a tweener, but spends a lot of time on the perimeter, 6'8". You look at Jalen Hood-Schifino right there, the big-time 5-star freshman, 6'6". You compare him to a 6-foot R.J. Davis, 6'4" Caleb Love, some of the two top scorers that North Carolina has on the perimeter. If I'm Indiana in this game, I'm not going shot for shot. I'm not turning this into a track meet, because you're not going to outrun the North Carolina Tar Heels. Because you know what you got to do? You got to bring your guards inside. Okay, I watched during the Xavier game, that 81-79 win for the Hoosiers earlier on this season. I saw a lot of cutting and slashing to the basket. I saw a lot of Trace Jackson Davis post up. I saw a lot of getting the guards down low. It's kind of that old Bo Ryan swing offense kind of Wisconsin things where you rotate the guards and they're eventually kind of posting up down low. I want to utilize my size, and I want to utilize that matchup for Indiana. I want to go inside. I want to try to make this a half-court game, even though the Indiana Hoosiers are one of the highest scoring teams in college basketball this year. Look, they're 8th in the country in scoring. North Carolina can score the basketball as well. There's no question about that. But I want to utilize my size. Okay, I'm going to probably put out a 4-guard lineup with Jalen Hood-Schifino, Race Johnson, if you want to consider him a guard on the perimeter. You look at Trace Jackson Davis out there as well, and Xavier Johnson. Okay, this is a team, though, I want to body up North Carolina and their guards. I want to try to slow the pace of play, try to shrink the court a little bit. Now, neither team really has a great big man as well. You look at Pete Nance. Pete Nance was the leading scorer for Northwestern last year. He transferred to North Carolina. He's kind of the big threat for the Tar Heels, but he kind of stretch fours a lot. He kind of gets out on the perimeter, takes a lot of jump shots. Now, when he's out on the perimeter, that allows what Indiana has to do. They got to go one and done and prevent offensive rebounds and second chance opportunities for the North Carolina Tar Heels. If they can do that, take advantage of their size on the perimeter, I think they can have a good chance to win this basketball game. Both teams are going to look to score a lot of points, but I think teams are going to look to score the ball and score a lot of points in a lot of different ways. It's going to be a great matchup between the Indiana Hoosiers and the North Carolina Tar Heels. Look, maybe North Carolina is not number one in the country. Maybe beating the Tar Heels wouldn't mean as much now as it did maybe last week. But you got to think North Carolina is going to be one of the best teams in the ACC this year. You got to think that they're going to climb their way up the rankings. When we look back at RPI, when we look back late in February and March, when it comes seeding time, if Indiana can get the win over North Carolina, that'd be a big, big non-conference win. Remember, this is kind of just the start for the Indiana Hoosiers because they got to play Arizona. They got to play Kansas on back-to-back Saturdays. So we'll see how that all factors into what's happening right now. You know, we're going to really find out because really only Indiana's test was an 81-79 win, close win at Xavier earlier on this season. I think a lot of them has been blowouts against lesser teams. So we're really going to find out what kind of team the Indiana Hoosiers are. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great college basketball showcase. Really looking forward to that matchup between Indiana and North Carolina on the basketball court. It should be really, really, really fun. Just kind of wrapping things up here on some comments as we're kind of winding down. We're at almost 9:30 Central Time here in the great state of Minnesota. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through some comments, try to get back online here a little bit, kind of talking about Ryan Day, Michigan. Day said he wanted to put up. I remember when he said he wanted to put up 100 points on Michigan back in the day. Yeah, it's the Big Ten is all about physicality. Like you saw it at these two press conferences with Matt Rhule and Luke Fickell. You got to be physical to win in the Big Ten Conference. You got to be physical. That's it. If you're not physical, then you're gonna get run off. Like that's what Ohio State has figured out. You know, Ryan Day came into this in 2019, COVID year 2020. Like if you look at this, he hasn't done that great. He's only beaten Ohio. He's only beaten Ohio State one time. So How's Ryan Day going to – you got to think people, administration and people at Ohio State aren't going to be happy about keeping on losing to Michigan, even if they're doing things. Now, things might change if Ohio State can sneak their way into the college football playoff. Then that kind of changes things. Ryan Day commented, said they could be a dangerous team if they get into the playoff. And it all depends. If they're not healthy – and, if they don't have Mayan Williams, they don't have Travion Henderson, they can't run the football. I mean, you go up against the physical teams like a Michigan, like a Georgia. They might be able to – I would love to see an Ohio State-USC game. Man, the points might be flying there, but I think the only way that would happen would be a national championship game right there. So, Mark Edwards – said it, Ohio State does not have a problem. They're a great team. They're a great program. Ryan Day is a great coach. I think, Ryan Day is still below 50 years old. I honestly think that Ryan Day is still – I still think he could go to the NFL. But maybe he needs to prove a little bit more before he gets there. He just seems to – I've always had that feeling about him that, I think Ryan Day is going to go to the NFL someday. I don't know why. I've just always had that feeling about him. I always thought that he could succeed in that mindset. Michigan had a lot of down years for a while, and now they've been able to build their program back up, and it's good times for Michigan. Now, just imagine if Michigan can recruit on the level of an Ohio State. They get even better recruits coming in. Man. It's gonna be tough sledding for the rest of the Big Ten. It's gonna be tough. And now you open Los Angeles. Now you open California. That opens a whole recruiting thing in a couple of years. Ooh, that's going to be interesting as well to see. If Michigan and some of these other schools to go in there and do that. I think that could be very interesting as well. Winding down here on the live stream. Just want to kind of pose. Just want to throw some things out for the future. Once again, if you haven't subscribed, now is a great time to do so. Big Ten content every single day here on the channel. Also, Twitter is a great place to get updates. So for a live stream like this or something else, Twitter is a great place to get. Put a lot of other stuff on Twitter. Twitter is a great news source as well. One thing I'm looking to incorporate here on these live streams as well in the future is live calls. I do have a Google Voice number that I do have set up. Just looking to do some live calls because talking for 3 straight hours is tiring. Water, please. So it'd also be nice to kind of get some feedback from you guys, be able to interact a little bit. So I do have a phone line kind of set up. Would be interested whether it's in the live chat right now, whether it's just commenting or Twitter, whatever. Just let me know when and wherever if that's something that would interest you guys. Mark kind of chiming in here. Michigan was Nebraska about 10 years ago. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay, that kind of opens up my mind a little bit. It takes a great head coach, time, faith, and commitment. Rich Rod, was that a 3-win year? I don't remember what year that was. I don't remember which year that was. But I believe that, they had some bad years. It takes the right guy. Head coaches are so important in college football. Is Matt Rhule the guy to do that? I don't know. It's a great question. Just reading some comments here from some of you guys. The thing is part of what makes a culture is having lots of local guys. It's what makes the Southern schools so tough. I want the best local guys. Yeah, I mean, Ohio's a decent, state for. They've had some good players, obviously, come out of the state of Ohio. I think it's a solid state for recruiting. But I think I said this early in the show. You still need to be able to recruit nationally. Recruiting nationally is still for almost every Big Ten team needs to be done if you want to compete on that level to be able to compete in the college football playoff. So we're closing in on 9:30 right now. It's late, and I think it's just about time to wrap things up. Really appreciate you guys for coming on the live stream. Looking to do this a little bit more. These live, this is what I really enjoy. I really enjoy doing these live streams, talking to you guys, interacting with you guys. That's kind of the best part of this channel. That's my opinion. Ever since I started doing live stream, I've always wanted to do more. So really thought this one went well, coming off our live stream last night as well. So appreciate you guys in the comments. It's been a great live stream tonight. Our longest live stream, going on 2.5 hours right now. Here's what we got coming up. We have got Michigan-Purdue preview. Check out that on the channel on Wednesday. Okay? We got that on Wednesday. We're going to preview some basketball later in the week. Working some logistics out to schedule a discussion piece with John Johnston from Coronation, talking about Matt Rhule and that hire at the University of Nebraska. So make sure you stay tuned for all that stuff on the channel. Thanks, everybody, for joining me on Big Ten Ted Live tonight. I'm Big Ten Ted, and we will see you in the next one.